Hey, Pilgrims, Pastor Craig, Horton Congregational Church. Well, as I mentioned several times, we've got a grandbaby coming, our first one, and Lori is all right into doing all the crafty things, making some homemade toys. She's got some little wooden blocks that were blank that she's bought, and some she's going to put pictures on. Some she'll probably paint. Some of them she wants to set up like dice, and that's what I'm working on right here on this one. I've got her Dremel tool out here with a little bit of a rough tip on it, and burning the holes into these little squares to make them look like a die, each one of them. So some of them we're going to make fancified or falsified, if you will. They have all ones on every side, twos on every side, six on every side. But these are set up with the standard. And as I was getting ready to do these, I really learned some interesting things about dice and how they're made. You know, as you're well aware, the numbers 1 through 6, and of course, as you may well know, the opposite sides always add up to 7. So the 2 that I was just working on there with the Dremel tool is opposite to 5, so that those add up to 7. And there's a pattern for if you've got the 1 up, then the 2 is to the right and the 3 is to the left. That kind of sets it. And I read a little bit more that went on to talk about perfect dice or professional gambling dice. And in that case, you know, when you have a lump of wood or of plastic or ivory or whatever you're making these out of, and you take 6 holes out on one side and only 1 hole out on the other, well, that one with only 1 hole, that side's going to weigh more than the one that's got 6 on it. So if you take what's kind of a standard die and toss it and toss it and toss it and roll it while you're playing Yahtzee or whatever, Sorry or Trouble or whatever those you're working on, and the larger numbers on a non-professional die are likely to show up more often because it's a lighter side. It'll land more on the smaller numbers, and then that's what you'll see. That's after an awful lot of throws is the probability on that. Whereas professional dies, they compensate weight-wise for the sides that have more material taken out because there's more holes or more divots or more pips in it, if you will. And that's what how they make those. And that's some interesting stuff. But as I'm working on these, the question arose in my mind, now what's the difference between rolling the dice and casting lots? We read about the Old Testament casting lots, and is it the same kind of gambling as people who are playing craps or are at the gambling table at a casino? And is that the same? Are we really just betting on God's will here? And if we go back and do a little more research, we'll find that is not the case at all. That in the case of casting lots, which we find in the Old Testament, the Urim and the Thummim and different other kinds of casting lots, the ancient Israelite priests kept the Urim and the Thummim, which we now modern theorize that maybe those were different colored stones or some kind of yes-no kind of pieces that were used to determine the will of God. And in those cases, very specific questions were asked. Very different things were looked at. It was under a very controlled environment when they were trying to ascertain the will of God. And they used it from everything from divvying up the land as the land of Canaan, as it was divvied up amongst the various tribes. The sailors in the story of Jonah cast lots to see whose guilt was causing all the storms around the ship. We have casting lots for the assignments of the priest, Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, to cast lots for him to be chosen to be priest that day when the angel visited him and announced the birth of John the Baptist to him. We have casting lots after Judas hung himself from betraying Christ and the disciples wanting to replace that spot in the 12, and they cast lots between 2 men to decide who was going to do that. But here's what's interesting. Why don't we cast lots anymore? Why don't we use that same method? Well, if we look at the Bible, we find that after the day of Pentecost, there's no longer any kind of record within the Bible of casting lots. And why would that be? Well, Jesus said in John 14, as he's preparing his disciples for his departure, those verses that we often read at a funeral, I go to prepare for you a place in my Father's house. There are many rooms, many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you. And once I prepare a place for you, I'll come again so that you can be with me. And if it were not so, why would I have told you any differently? And then at the end of John 14, a little further along, he talks about sending the advocate, the comforter. He said, it's necessary for me to go so that the advocate, the comforter, the Holy Spirit can come and will teach you all things, he said, and remind you of what I have said. And then we find, of course, in Acts 2, the day of Pentecost, the actual coming of the Holy Spirit, the birthday of the church, if you will. And that comforter, that advocate, the Holy Spirit, who's going to teach us all things, is now with us and is now willing to become part of us. And that we ask for the coming of that Holy Spirit within us to bind with us and to teach us and to show us the way is the point. So it's no longer necessary for us to go through that process of casting lots in order to ascertain the will of God, because the Holy Spirit will work within us with our spirit, at one with our spirit, to show us the way when we learn to discern that and we learn to turn to Him and rely upon Him and look for His communication with us. So it's not the same as just rolling the dice and trying to earn illicit money. And by the way, the Bible warns us about that. Taking practices to earn illicit money. Gambling, you're going to be hard pressed to find that supported in the Bible anywhere at all. In fact, it's warned against in that illicit earnings of funds. So there is a difference. Rolling the dice is not the same as casting lots, and we don't cast lots anymore because we have the Holy Spirit with us. It's my prayer that you'll learn to discern the Holy Spirit's will for your life, for the things that are going on in your life. In the meantime, we still use a set of dice to play an awful lot of kids' games and adult games and card games and board games, and some people use it for more illicit purposes than that. And it's kind of fun to play around with them. But my prayer is you'll rely upon the Holy Spirit. God be with you till we meet each other again. By God be with you till we meet again. And bless your soul. Take care.